All right, you ready for this, bro?
Yeah, yes. Of course I am. I'm super excited, man. Thanks for doing a session with me.
Yeah, I figured, kind of on two levels since you weren't able to play last session, and um, it happens to be the week leading up to the summer solstice. Why not?
Exactly. Hey, hold on. Before we get started, let me close this window because it's actually getting kind of cold in here.
Sure.
All right, that's better.
All right, so the session is basically taking place, I believe it is, watch out, cat. It's June 14th, 1924. It's a Saturday night, and the others have gone out today. They were doing some investigation as to the location. They were trying to find a location of where they moved this old Anglican graveyard, and also doing some other investigations. And Usephus, you decided to stay behind and do a little bit of research, perhaps consulting the book Nameless Cults, also continuing to write basically a statement of what happened out at Folly Farm. And you're pretty much finished with it. The statement, that is. And it gets pretty late at night. You, Eusephus, the butler, Beauregard, and two of the Pinkerton men are kind of staking out Jacob's Manor. They come in every once in a while to make a phone call, things like that. But you have two Pinkerton guys kind of hanging out around the house, as per usual. But otherwise, it's just you and Beauregard in the house that night.
Where's Henrietta? She's off.
Yeah, Henrietta's off tonight. She came in early this morning to fix a brunch up for Jacob and some guest that he had. Actually, you met. You were at the meeting with what's Tom's character's name?
Dr. Van Helsing?
Dr. Van Helsing, yes.
Yeah, the older gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
But with the long beard.
Mm-hmm. So you stay up into the night in Jacob's study, at his desk, finishing up this, basically like a journal or a statement about what happened in England when you and Percy Fawcett were investigating this dark child matter. And as a habit recently, every once in a while, you'll get one of those golden medallions out of Jacob's safe, and just kind of keep it near you as you're writing and studying. You find it to be sort of soothing and calming for some reason to have it nearby.
Interesting.
Kind of reminds you of Percy and what happened down in the Honduran jungle, and how, I don't know, how important of an item it really is. It's like really the only thing besides the various papers and things that you have left from from Percy. It's about the only thing you have left is it's kind of like a memento almost in a way, but you do get sort of this soothing, calming feeling by having it nearby as you're writing, just sitting on the desk there. So you work late into the night, and you fall asleep at the desk, and you have a dream, and what you think is a dream. Give me one sec. In your dream, you find yourself standing near the barn at Folly Farm. And it's almost like it was just yesterday. It's twilight, and pink and yellow ribbons, clouds in the western sky as you find yourself standing there. And a lone crow is cawing at you from the top of the barn as you look around and kind of survey the farmyard. You see rusted farm implements strewn about the yard like long forgotten skeletons, rooted in a rotten overgrowth of sickly weeds. And suddenly, you begin hearing a twittering laughter from the direction of the farmhouse. You turn your head to look at the farmhouse, and the dilapidated structure is covered in withered, diseased vines. Its windows are aged and broken. And you spot a silhouetted figure of a child in the darkened doorway of the farmhouse. A raven-haired girl wearing a blood-spattered white dress. She emerges into the dim twilight, and a baleful grin forms on her lips. Her eyes are loathsome and black, and you're petrified by her menacing stare. The girl approaches you, her demonic eyes locked on yours. She raises her arm and points behind you. "There," she whispers. Her gaze is mesmerizing, and your eyes slowly and reluctantly travel from her dreadful eyes to her pointing finger. And with some effort, you turn to see what she's pointing at. It's the dense, dark line of trees at the edge of the farmyard. The Folly Wood. A thick blanket of fog clings closely to the ground at its threshold. Twilight suddenly turns to night. You turn your gaze upward to the cloudless sky, where thousands of stars shine dimly above the trees, and an icy chill grips your soul when you realize that the moon is absent. You peer into the forest. It is dark and still, permeated with some profane and unnatural mist. A memory of Uncle Pearl's voice enters your mind. "Thar's walking the things in them woods, boy. Things what learnt to walk, what ought to crawl." You turn back to face the child, but she is gone. You turn and look at the farmhouse, searching for any sign of the dark child. The shadowy windows, broken and black, stare at you like pitiless observers of your growing dread. The fragrance of the forest is sickly sweet perfume. Pine needles crunch beneath your bare feet as you walk through the forested hills of the Severn Valley. Again, Uncle Pearl's voice enters your mind. "Them evils what crawl through the night in them hills, boy. Yep, that's what swept up your ma and pa." Your heartbeat pounds in your ears as you stop to catch your breath after climbing a densely wooded hill, and you look up. The uncaring stars stare coldly at you through the sinewy and sinister branches above, and you hear something move in a nearby tree. "Yeah, squirrel or coon, probably," you think to yourself, wiping sweat from your eyes. You squint into the darkness and listen. You suddenly feel that you're being watched. A subtle change of light and shadow blurs your vision, and some sudden phantom breeze causes the surrounding branches and boughs to creak and groan. Startled, you begin to run. Soon you notice a flickering reddish glow through the trees, and you stop again to catch your breath, peering through the trees at the strange light. It appears to be a flame in the distance. As you approach the reddish glow, it begins to flare and flicker, and soon you see a large bonfire through the trees, but it is oddly shaped, peculiar, and familiar. As you step into a clearing, you are shocked by the image you see before you. Upon a burning funeral pyre lies the corpse of Colonel Percy Fawcett, enveloping the pyre as a ferocious, twisting flame, a great mass of cyclonic fire whirling into the star-strewn sky above. It is just as Usephus remembers it, the day of Percy's fiery funeral in the Honduran jungle not so long ago. A profound sense of loss and sadness invades your conscience as tears well up in your eyes. Suddenly you perceive the sweet, innocent voice of a child nearby. "He didn't have to die, you know," says the child. You look in the direction from which the voice came and see the dark child standing nearby. Flickering shadows play across her pale, blood-stained form. Within her unholy black eyes you see the flickering reflection of the burning funeral pyre. "Why did you let him die, Usephus? He trusted you. He loved you," she says with a wretched frown. Your eyes, veiled in tears, shift to the blazing pyre. Percy's corpse abruptly twitches and sits up on the pyre. Its torso heaves and shudders as it seems to draw breath. Its head turns slowly to face you. Usephus's face contorts into an intermingled expression of horror and sorrow as the cadaver slowly swings its legs over the edge of the pyre and plants its feet on the ground. Ablaze in a nimbus of red-blue fire, the cadaver stands and begins lumbering toward you with short, fractured steps, and Usephus recognizes a bleak and brooding expression on Percy's face through the swirling maelstrom of flame that surrounds him. "Percy! No!" you gasp. Your muscles refuse to respond as you attempt to flee, and your gaze is locked onto the ghastly, blazing form of Percy's cadaver as it moves inexorably towards you. Your head pounds, your heart races, your mouth agape as you attempt to scream but can't. You are frozen in terror as you feel the intense heat from the fiery corpse before you. He stands before you now. An expression of loathing and revulsion forms on Percy's face. "Usephus! Usephus! Why?" groans Percy's corpse. "Why did you let me die?" The cadaver falls to its knees and onto its side on the ground before you. You look, and the dark child is gone. You begin to hear sounds in the forest, familiar sounds. Suddenly, there's a monstrous bleating and hooting sound coming from the north through the trees. You look, and you see an immense black shape moving among the trees toward you, your feet rooted to the ground. A thunderous roar shakes your senses as the thing emerges from a nearby thicket. It crawls towards you, a black, shapeless mass of dark green tentacles. The thing flows upon its hooves. Its slimy mouths and snaky arms drip with thick green mucus. Wet and restless sucking sounds from the thing's mouths intensify as you begin to scream.
Oh, man. Now, can I do anything, Sean?
You wake with a shout. You find yourself in Jacob's study, sitting at a desk with papers strewn about on top of it. One of the golden medallions lies on the desk nearby. And you hear the buzzing sound of a ringing telephone in the kitchen. What I need here is a sanity check.
Oh, you shall have one.
Going to need two, actually, but roll the first one.
Okay. Oop, didn't make the first one.
Okay.
And go ahead and roll the second.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead and roll the second.
Oh man, I gotta stop rolling off this character sheet.
Maybe so. You lose 6 sanity.
All right. That was definitely a horrible dream. And awesome. Well, really, whoa. Nice, nicely done, by the way, Sean. All right.
Thank you. So Usephus is now effectively in shock and terrified, and currently he's suffering from severe paranoia. So you hear the sound of a ringing telephone in the kitchen. And it's like one of those old-timey phones. It's more like a buzz than a ring. It's like bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. And you stand, kind of knocking the chair down behind you. You hear the sound of a blood-curdling scream from the kitchen. It sounds like Beauregard, the butler, and he's screaming madly.
I run in there. What do I have on me? My pistol and my knife?
Yeah, you've got your pistol in a holster, like in a shoulder holster. And a knife, I guess you carry. What do you carry, on your waist or your boot, your belt?
Yeah, on the back of on my back, like just in the back of the pants.
Yeah, but effectively right now, dude, you are temporarily insane. Okay.
Okay.
Because you've lost 6 sanity points in one shot. So what's going to happen is you stand, you knock the chair over, and then you hear the scream from the kitchen. The telephone continues to buzz, and you're kind of in shock. So you're just standing there, and you're looking at the door out into the hallway that leads to the kitchen from Jacob's study. Suddenly, you see her. She enters the study. It's the girl. She's standing there kind of in half shadow, and you see blood dripping from her black eyes. She's also got blood spattered all over her dress. She's a girl of about 7 years old, about 3.5 feet tall. And she's staring at you with those dark eyes. You can see the glimmer of her eyes coming off of the lamp, the desk lamp. Other than that, it's pretty shadowy and dark in the study. And you stand there just kind of frozen in terror as she enters and stands in the doorway. And you hear her voice. She says, "It is time to pay the price, Usephus." And she waves her hand kind of in front of her face in this sort of graceful motion. And you see blackness. It is night, and you see the sky beginning to lighten in the east. Again, you're standing in a forest. You look up at the sky, and you see that Aldebaran is in the sky. But there's no moon. The stars are clearly visible. You're standing on the edge of a dark, gloomy wood, and you feel trepidation. You feel kind of scared to enter the wood, but you're compelled to do so. A young girl, dark-haired, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, takes your hand, and you look down at her. And she's normal. She looks just like a dark-haired little girl. Her eyes are completely normal. You know, this time she doesn't have blood all over or anything. Just this kind of pretty little girl takes your hand, and you look down at her. She smiles, and she says, "I'm going to guide you safely through the wood, Usephus, to a secret place." And her voice is pleasant and soft. and irresistible. You're led by the girl into the wood, and although the forest seems somewhat claustrophobic, you feel no unease. You feel kind of excited to see what this secret thing is that she's leading you to in the woods. Some time passes, and you enter a clearing in which lay a gigantic stone. She bids you to lie down on the stone, saying that you should rest after your long journey. No sooner than you lay down when ropes, no, not ropes, but thick black tentacles slither from the stone and bind you to it tightly. It's an altar where many have died to feed what? Something rises around the altar, stalagmites sprouting through the mossy soil. You struggle against your bonds to no avail. Not stalagmites, not rocks, but teeth, enormous teeth closing around you, and you begin to scream. The teeth are piercing your flesh. Blood is flowing. The charnel stench. The horror. The horror!
Oh, God.
Give me another sanity check.
All right. I made it.
Oh, you know what? I actually made a mistake. You don't get a sanity check.
Damn, it's the first roll I made.
It's I know, sorry about that. It's actually
That's okay.
A loss of 5 more sanity.
Oh, just a straight loss of 5 more?
It's a straight loss of 5, yes.
All right. Let's see here. I am... All right.
And not to
I am at 36 now.
Yeah, and not to break immersion too much, but I'll kind of, just so you kind of understand what just happened there. That is a mind blast spell. What you just saw was the effect of a mind blast. She just blasted your mind, dude.
Well, she did a damn good job at it.
Yeah. So you come to your senses, and you find yourself lying on the floor of Jacob's study, and you're screaming. Just screaming your freaking lungs out. And you look at the doorway, and she's not there. You stand up, you run out of the study, you look left towards the kitchen, you don't see anything, you look right, and there's the front door, and you bolt for the door. You run out the front door into the street. It's night. You begin running down the street towards let me look here. Let me look at the map real quick. You run out onto Windsor Street, which is where Jacob's Manor sits, and you start running down Windsor towards Broadway. It's probably getting close to midnight, and your eyes are just wide, and you're looking like I said, you're suffering from extreme paranoia right now. Everywhere you look, you think you see the dark child. Everywhere you look, behind that house is one of those things. You see it moving. It looks like a tree, but it's not. It's not. You're absolutely sure it's one of those things. You run down Windsor, and you're approaching the intersection of Broadway, and you don't stop. You keep running and keep running. You run out into Broadway, and you hear the rush of a vehicle coming at you. You turn, and you see this big truck, this big lorry coming right at you. I need you to make a dodge roll.
I made it by 1 point.
You made it by 1 point?
Yes.
You made it by 1 point?
Yeah, it was 56 and I made it at 55.
All right. You kind of stop and lunge to the right, and the truck clips you.
Okay.
You take 5 damage.
All right, I'm at 9 hit points.
What was your total before that?
14.
14, so you would have had to take 7. The truck clips you and knocks you to the ground, and you're kind of stunned for a moment. The truck screeches to a halt. This man gets out of the truck, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, what's your problem? Hey!" And then he sees that you're hurt. He's like, "You okay?" And he rushes over to you, and he's standing over you. And you just feel kind of woozy, and you're kind of snapped out of it a little bit now. Being hit by the truck kind of snaps you out of this crazy paranoia that you were going through.
Thank God for truck hitting me, right?
Yeah, and it feels like your left leg could be broken.
My leg.
Yeah.
I think it's broken.
Oh, he says, well, here, let me get you into the truck and we'll take you down to the hospital. And there's a passerby. He's like, "Hey, fella, help me get this guy. I think his leg's broken." He's not, and so this guy comes over and they start helping you into the back of the truck. And you hear the guy saying, like, "He just ran out in front of me. I didn't even see him." And so they drive you down across the Charles River down into Boston. It only takes about 5-10 minutes to get you down there. And they take you to the emergency room of the hospital. And you've got these doctors and nurses get you on a gurney, and they take you in, and they start examining you.
All right. Well, I need to let somebody know I'm here. I need to call Mr. Crown and Shield's house. Ooh, look at this.
Yeah, I put up a little map here. It might be helpful. It's a little bit more of a modern map, but it'll do. And so you're over here. You're down in downtown Boston, at the hospital. Cambridge is up here. You can see where the Crown and Shield Manor is. This is Margate
Silver
House.
Twilight.
Last session. There's the lodge up there.
Yep.
Silver Twilight Lodge. So they're like, the doctor's like, just calm down, and they ask your name and everything. You're gonna give them your name.
Yeah, I'll give him my name.
Yeah, they want to know like your name and your place of residence and all that kind of stuff. He's like, just calm down, Mr. Braun. We'll get in touch with your family or friends or whatever.
I need to talk to him now. I'm kind of emphatic. Like.
He's like, don't you worry. He says, your leg is fractured. We're gonna have to put a cast on it, and we want to make sure that you don't have any other injuries. So you have to stay here for a little while while we examine you. Don't worry, we'll have somebody get in touch with Mr. Crown and Shield for you. So they keep you there for a couple of hours, and they check you over pretty thoroughly. They mend you have some scratches and some cuts, and your leg's not broken, but it's been fractured, kind of down in your shin area. So they got your leg is sort of in a half cast that they put on you.
Can they give me some narcotics to take with me?
Yeah, they give you some laudanum while you're in the hospital. You are in a lot of pain. And they give you a little bit of laudanum to take with you, as well as some crutches that they give you there at the hospital. And They tell you that they can't seem to reach Mr. Crowninshield. Nobody's answering at his place of residence, and they ask you if there's anywhere else, that they'd like you to contact. But actually, by this point, a couple of hours later, you've got your faculties. You're still a little on edge. Well, I should say quite a bit on edge after what just happened. Still a little paranoid. Um, you're actually, I mean, whatever you decide to do, you're a little hesitant actually to even leave the hospital at this point because at least here, there's a lot of people around, there's kind of some busy work going on and stuff like that. There's no sign of like any little girls or anything. You don't see any little girls around. You're constantly checking for little girls,
Keep me in the adult ward, please.
Yeah. So, so I'm assuming you gave them Jacob's address, your address.
Yes.
And
yeah.
they say that, they'll send you a bill, for the expenses and everything. They give you something for the pain. And they say that they want you to come back, in 2 days, so that they can take a look at it and make sure that, the fracture's healing, and that the cast is correctly applied and all of that kind of stuff. They want you to come back to the hospital in 2 days.
I reckon that sounds fair.
Yeah. Also, during this time, you speak to a couple of police officers, who just want to, they just want to know what happened. And the truck driver is there. And he basically just tells them exactly what happened. Like, I was just driving along Broadway, and this guy came running out into the street, and I hit him. What would you like to tell the police that happened, Usephus?
He's telling the truth. I ran into the street, and I weren't looking, and it was just a mix-up.
All right, they buy it. They seem a little bit suspicious. You actually, you overhear them say something. It sounds like they may be a little suspicious that you may have been drinking or something, but they can't prove it.
That's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, you don't have any alcohol on your breath or anything. You're not showing any signs of being intoxicated or nothing. But that's kind of what they think. But so they just kind of chalk it up as an accident, and they leave you alone. So at this point, it's about 3 o'clock in the morning when they release you from the hospital. And one thing that's kind of comforting to Usephus as he exits the hospital, it's night. It's a clear night. You can see the moon, at least a half a moon, up there in the sky, which kind of confirms, that what you just experienced was definitely a dream. But it was so real what was happening. Up until now, you really weren't even quite sure whether it was a dream or not.
It surely did seem real.
Yeah, but the moon is up there, and you remember there was no moon in your dream. Both the dream and the vision or whatever you had subsequent to that, when the Dark Child told you that it was time to pay.
Well, now they've left me on my own recognizance here.
They have. They gave you some crutches. It hurts like a bitch, but you're able to kind of get along with the crutches somewhat. You're in downtown Boston, near Beacon Hill, at the hospital. And Jacob's place is just across the river. The scale on this map isn't really too big, so we're looking at about a mile. Jacob lives about a mile from downtown Boston. And being
Can,
downtown, you could hail a cab or something like that if you want to.
well, now, do we have a contact number for all these Pinkerton boys that are always hanging about?
Well, as far as you know, there should have been a couple of them there at the Crown and Shield Manor tonight.
Hmm.
But yeah, they have a main office here in Boston that you would have a number for.
Well, I'll just hail a cab.
Yeah, there's actually some cabs outside the hospital just sitting there, so it's pretty easy to get a cab.
All right, I'll tell them where I need to go. You get me across that river there. I need to go to such and so address on Windsor Street.
He's like, sure, hop on in. I mean, he gets you there in like 7 minutes flat. It's not that far. He drops you off in the front.
Thank you kindly, sir.
Yeah, Jacobs Manor's like at the corner of, I believe, Washington and Windsor there. Pretty close to the main thoroughfare on Main Street.
I'm thinking I'm going to walk into a bloodbath in here somehow.
That's exactly what you think.
I'm like, God have mercy.
Yeah.
I was like, hope sweet Beauregard ain't bit the big one, but we'll see.
Well, so you're just going to go in? You don't see the Pinkerton guys out front, as you would normally expect.
All right, well, I'll walk around the residence.
Okay.
Or crutch around it.
Okay.
I see anything suspicious out back, or?
Yeah, well, there's a main hallway. As soon as you enter the door, there's a foyer, and then there's a main hallway that kind of goes back. His study's off to the left. There's like a guest bedroom to the right. At the end of the hallway is the kitchen area. It's a pretty large kitchen. You go in the kitchen. That's where you heard the scream come from.
Yeah.
And that's where it looks like the dark child came from as she walked into the doorway of the study. Nothing really seems out of place. You look at the telephone's hung up on the wall. Nothing really seems out of place. It looks like it's been cleaned up. No sign of anything really.
So let me ask you a question. We don't have the oil. So if I wanted to put myself in the study and put a elder sign in on it, I would expend permanent power to do that, or how would that work?
Correct. Yeah, I believe it costs 2 points of power to do the ritual for an elder sign.
Okay.
Without the oil. You guys are so close to getting some of that oil, but not yet.
All right, well, this is just rat weird. I mean...
Yeah. No sign of Beauregard. You know, you think that even being early in the morning, you would think that he would have heard you come in. And he would usually greet any visitors or anything that are in there.
And there's no disturbance in there at all?
No disturbance in the kitchen at all, no. You haven't checked upstairs yet.
Well, I guess if that's the one place I haven't checked, I'll make my way there.
Okay. You go up the stairs, and you get to the top landing, and there are two hallways, one on your right, one on your left, and actually there's another short one that kind of goes back behind the stairway to the other bedrooms. In the hallway to the right, which is where Jacob's room and the butler's room are, you see Beauregard lying face down in the hallway. He's just sprawled out on the floor.
I'll go over to him.
All right, as you approach him, you see he's breathing. He appears to be unconscious.
All right, and then I'll go down and roll him over and try to like slap him in the face, like Beauregard.
Give me a first aid. See if you can wake him up.
I'm pretty sure I made that.
All right. You kind of gently, slap him around a little bit, and his
Gentle
eye,
slaps of
yeah,
love.
his eyes flutter open. Uh, and he's like, "Oh, what happened, Usephus?"
Well, now just take it easy, Beauregard. Settle down. What's the last thing you remember, boy? I found you out here in the middle of the hallway.
He sits up and he's kind of rubbing his head. He says, "Oh, my aching head." He says, "There was a girl, a little girl,
Oh Lord.
in the kitchen. She had a white dress, and she said something to me, and I saw, I saw, and you see his eyes kind of like start staring into the darkness in the hallway. It was terrible." He starts kind of whimpering and sobbing.
I don't often do this, but I give him a hug. I'm like, it's gonna be right. It's okay. She's not here anymore.
Yeah, he's a mess right now. He just kind of
I know the feeling.
but he says that's the only thing I remember of seeing the girl, this horrible girl. Her eyes, there was something wrong with her eyes, he says.
I was like, well, I think I have a story to tell you and the others when we have a chance.
Usephus immediately recognizes the significance of Beauregard seeing the dark child.
Yeah, he's on board now to the
Yeah,
welcome to the train, buddy.
right.
Well, I guess me and you have some work to do now, Beauregard. You hear me? We're gonna make this little girl go away. We got some work to do.
Who was she? He says. Who is this? Who is she?
Why don't you come downstairs, boy, and read what I writ?
Okay. He follows you, and as you guys are walking down the stairs, he's like, she wasn't human.
No.
She wasn't, and what she made me see these visions of monsters. It was terrible. He starts crying again.
Get on down here. I'm gonna give you something to drink, okay? I'll be Beauregard tonight, all right? So just settle down, boy. You want whiskey? You want scotch? You want
a little milk and brandy.
all right. So I pour him a nice milk and brandy, mainly brandy.
Yeah. He tells you that earlier that evening, Jacob had called around, he thinks it was around 10:30 or 11 p.m. Jacob had called and asked the Pinkerton guys that were there at the house to meet him at the police station. He said something had happened. So he says that's where the Pinkerton guys went.
That's good news. I was thinking we might find some bodies around here. I weren't quite right in the mind earlier.
He says no, they left. That they did say that they were going to send another guy over here, but I guess they didn't. He says I haven't heard from Jacob since then.
Well, he's a pretty resourceful man. He'll turn up. Hey, you got a couple of them drinks in you there, Beauregard?
Yes, I'm feeling much better, Mr. Braun. Thank you.
All right, now just we're gonna have story time now.
Story time.
And I hand him story time. I'm gonna hand you this. hand him what I wrote up. Like, take your time. We'll talk after you read it.
Okay. You see, he takes keen interest in it as he's reading this thing. Would you like to read it?
You want me to read it to him?
Do you want me to read it?
Oh, you want me to read the whole thing?
I don't know. I'm thinking, why not?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah.
I've got it in a handout here. Let me see.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to. You made some revisions and so forth. So
just one slight revision.
Well, I've got it. I took the revision you sent me and incorporated into the draft.
Yeah. Well, I've got it right here. You could pop that into its own window and you could read it right from there if you want.
Yeah. Oh, look, there it is.
Yeah, take it back over here.
There we go. Okay. Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
June 14th, 1924. My name is Usephus Braun, and I ain't never been a man much for writing. I suppose I never fell into the habit of word scribbling like I fell into other habits, but then I suppose those are all considered vices and don't count none. Most of what I've seen in all my days has been the darker half of man where his life ain't worth spit. But every now and again, I saw some of that holy light they talk about in the good book. My younger years, I was passed around like a rotten tater until Uncle Pearl reckoned I'd be better off with him. Pearl was a mean cuss that spoke with his fists and his pistols about as much as he spoke with folks with talk. He took me in because having a child around makes you less suspicious and easier to pull the wool over eyes when you're driving stolen goods about. Pearl and I were business partners to start until the end, when Uncle Pearl caught 4 slugs in the chest of cheating sloppy drunk at a poker game at a coal mining camp. One thing about Pearl was he was a mite suspicious of the trees and woods. He'd ramble on about the woods, wizards, witchcraft, and critters that you'd have you crying for your mama like a soldier holding his guts in, a dying on the battlefield, especially while he was drunk, which was often. Said my pa and ma got swept up in the evils what crawls through the night in them hills. I believed Uncle Pearl to the letter when I was younger. Turns out Uncle Pearl was a sight more right than I could have known, seeing what these eyes have seen now. Once Pearl was gone, I was on my own. I left them hills of Kentucky and West Virginia, lied about my age, and joined up in the Merchant Marines. They trained me up on the Chicago typewriter and a few other things, for my sticky fingers had them boys showing me the exit. Can't say that I blame them. For the record, stealing the captain's liquor and his lady is never a good notion. I reckon that'll give you a better idea what old Usephus is about. That way, y'all won't be surprised when I light someone up with my knuckles or my boomsticks. There's always someone who's got it a-coming. The Merchant Marines helped me expandify my craft, which I now known as smuggling, from the hollers of the country to the oceans of the world. Because now I had the knowings of a good many other ways to turn a buck for than just corn liquor. Fact is, I ran into a feller by the name of Colonel Percy Fawcett. He spoke funny like all boys from England talk. But I reckon I learned a sight more about their light in the world from the good old Colonel. Heck, I even spotted him 600 pounds. That's Englishmen speak for money. Don't go saying that old UC was getting weak now. The Colonel weren't like you fellers. He had real honor. He was a military man who had been made exploring his craft. My heart went out to the Colonel because his son had gone a-missing, and he was always seeking the lost city of Z. He's in his 50s and wears a beard and dresses the part of an English exploring man. Suppose that's where the story really began. Can you imagine me, old Usephus Braun, rubbing shoulders with the good Colonel and drinking up tea with my pinky raised all fancy like in London town? Yep, it happened. The day it all started with the dark child I was turning up once again like a bad penny at his apartment in jolly old England. I was checking like usual to make sure my investment in the old Colonel hadn't snuck out. But like always, I found the Colonel right where he's supposed to be. The Colonel was in a state that morning on account of a letter that arrived that had his tail feathers all on a bind. Seems that prior occupant of his apartment had the same last name as him, and the letter had dark mentions and dire warnings. Now, if I'd received that letter, I would have put it in the dustbin and never thought about it again. But not the old Colonel. Knowing what I know now, I should have grabbed that old letter out of his hand, lit it with my next cigarette. But heck, hindsight's 2020 and all that. The colonel just couldn't help himself and got us dug into the mystery like a tick into a hound dog's ear. Back to this here tale, the letter was from a gent goes by the name of Professor Farnsworth. His letter was filled with wicked happenings and an urgent request for assistance. Read the mysterious letter. Weren't for long, we figured this here Farnsworth worked for some fancy British history museum or some such. We took our hides on down to that museum and got us introducified to one Doc Fitzgerald. Before I forget, we also met a lovely English flower by the name of Penelope Jones, who worked for the Doc. She took a shine to me, and I always know what to do with the young lady's heart. More importantly, her keys to all the locked doors in a fancy joint like that there museum. Doc Fitzgerald up and hired us to find Farnsworth and gave us the key to the Farnsworth house so we could do some snooping. £100, a nice start for an honest day's work. Turns out this Farnsworth had been gone for months, holed up in some cottage out in the English countryside. We turned up at Farnsworth's house on Portland Road in London with our key, credentials, and properly introduced ourselves to his neighbor reading the paper on the porch. We found that Farnsworth's home was clean, but that all the canned victuals was a-missing, and his gun case was empty with all the bullets missing. We figured this Farnsworth must be in some sort of mix-up at a place by the name of Folly Farms in Somerset County. It was about this time that we learned the next-door neighbor was one of them some bitches that's got it a-coming. He called one of them English Bobby boys, fancy speak for police, on us. The cops started knocking on the door, and we skedaddled out the back. Danged if that flatfoot almost pinched us, but we circled back a street, and he lost our trail. When you know it, the pesky cop was hanging out by our auto and no way out. I knowed what I did next made the colonel and my uncomfortable, but we was in a pinch and on a schedule. I found a vehicle up and around the street, punched a hole in the petrol tank, let it drain far enough away, lit a match, and we got ourselves a distraction in a car explosion. Guess what? Yep, the old copper had to go deal with that fire, and we just drove away like we was on Sunday Drive. Don't worry, I ain't forgot about that nosy neighbor what turned us over to the coppers neither on Portland Road. Like I said, some people got it a-coming.
Some people got it a-coming.
Famous Usephus quotes. I remember ringing up the young Miss Penelope to get access to their museum library. We was combing those books late in the night. Colonel and I plumb struck out on finding anything. But that Penelope, she helped us out with a find or two in their books. It was settled by the colonel and me to proceed with haste to the country and see if we couldn't scare that lost professor type. Penelope was interested in finding the professor and decided to throw in with us. That's one brave little missy, and I have to admit I might have been taking a bit of a shine to her as well. By now we had enough together to know the dark child was a summoned beast that would lure those that crossed her to their deaths. With the letter that started the whole thing and the articles, we knew she done took 2 boys to the grave in the 2 prior years during this here time of year. Also, that if we didn't hustle to find the good Professor Farnsworth, he might be next. We had a spring in our step as our mission was coming into focus. With that, we took our leave of the musty old halls of that museum. That many books in one place is a funny smell to it. I reckon I liked it, if truth be told. This is wherein the tale that I finally did spy one of them nightmares Uncle Pearl used to ramble on about. As our boots touched the outside stairs of the museum, I saw a little girl about knee-high to a grasshopper coming our way. Some right queer about her struck me straight away. As we descended the steps, she kept on straight at us, with her head turned down so we couldn't see her face none. Then, when she got close enough, she looked straight at me with those eyes. I can still see them now, them black, soulless eyes, like looking to your own grave and knowing there weren't no redemption. 2 black flames of lightning, the way to hell's gates, those eyes. Then the unholy dread child began a speaking a warning to me. The price must be paid. Aid him and I shall claim you next. I was froze, and she began moving away from me. I turned to the good colonel and asked if he'd seen what I'd seen, but it weren't for his eyes. Only I had seen the spirit of soiled damnation. I watched her disappear and swore my mind was playing tricks of the dirtiest sort on me. I was shook to my core, mostly for in some old cult book Percy learnt that this dark child was some so-called spirit of vengeance, what was only visible to them who she singled out for death. But we had work to do, and if in the dark vision that had shown itself to me was speaking true, then we had to hurry on. We met up, packed up, and followed the good professor's lead. We made sure to bring all our munitions and weapons. We headed out. It were late, but we had to go. You see, in the investigating we'd done, we found the dark child will take the living that crossed her on a given day each year. That day was a coming soon, and so we headed out in the black of the night in the colonel's car. We had a good drive, and that flower Penelope had a surprise up her sleeve. She had quite the singing voice and sung us a tune as we drove along. I ain't never heard that song before, but she told us it was popular. That happy moment weren't to last, for the hell-spawn dark child showed herself to my eyes once again. It were on an old country road out in them English hills she came, like a dagger thrown from old Mephistopheles himself. That dark child appeared in the middle of the road with my headlights lighting her up. I ain't a man that goes weak in these for much, but those eyes staring at me seemed to penetrate my soul like I ain't never felt before. I often wondered if I'd have been only able to steel my nerves, if just for a second I could have run that demon under the wheels. But it weren't to be. I lost control, swerved off the road, and jammed us straight into a ditch. We all got dinged up in the wreck, but nothing serious. I instantly mustered myself up, got to the trunk of the car, and got that Tommy gun out. I chambered around and looked into the dark for something to shoot at. Colonel and Penelope must have thought I was plumb lost my marbles. Some things can't be explained, but I must have convinced them that something was wrong. Luckily, we weren't more than a short crow's fly from that there cottage. I wanted to get to where we was going fast. Come hell or high water, I didn't want to be out in the open if that succubus showed up once again. Once we arrived, the sun was coming up, and we saw the cottage. I don't know how else to say it. The cottage looked like it had been run hard and put up wet. There was all these queer circles with stars right in the middle, all over the outside of the windows, roof, and, well, everywheres. The old professor was in there all right, but answered cross as a hornet when we knocked on the door. Penelope was able to sweeten us up enough so the professor moved all his barricade out of the way and let us in. Danged if that old boy didn't have a gun on us. He also had his ears plugged up, and, well, he looked like he hadn't slept or bathed in an age. Lord have mercy. The inside of that cottage had the smell of nature in it, and I ain't talking about the sweet flowers, more like a horse barn that ain't been shoveled or worse. Once the professor began to speak, and I understood he was afeared for his life on account of the dark child and hadn't left in days. At his request, remembering he was holding a gun, Farnsworth made us put the barricade back up. He seemed to ease up a bit and then showed us all these queer tablets and papers strewn about on a table. I have to say that I ain't never seen a man who liked scribbling words down more than him. I ain't never seen nothing like the professor when it came to that. Heck, I think he would have taken notes if he was being swallowed whole. After a while, the colonel sat assisting and reading them papers. I looked at the papers too, but I couldn't make no sense of them. Weren't for long that Colonel Fawcett had cracked a verse or two the good old professor hadn't. All them circles and stars inside them was called elder signs and promised to offer some protection if the words was said sung right. Now that the colonel had it down, he placed one of them symbols on a table for practice and began to say the words. There seemed to hang on the notes of the verses that the colonel spoke and focused up on top of a drawn symbol into a blue light glowing off it. A ripple seemed to come off it, like hard to explain. The professor was impressed with the colonel, and Penelope and I were speechless. Adventurous as always, the colonel wanted to try his hand on some of them elder signs on the outside of the building. I swear the old colonel had a nose for walking straight into trouble, but a heart of gold. Soon as we moved them barricades off the cottage door and stepped out the front door, that boy had a queer light in his eyes. He cocked his head like he hears something on the wind and was off like a shot towards the barn, like he was a-running for his life. There weren't no stopping him for nothing. See, the trouble was he was a-running full speed straight at a blade from some old plow and skewered himself on it like a K-bob. I were recovering the colonel the whole time, but now I was a dashing without thinking to pull him off that spike he was squirming on and drag him back. I'd seen sights like this before in my service time, and I tugged him off without too much trouble. And that lucky duck kept all his guts in. Heck, when I dragged him back, we put the barricade back up lickety-split, and I gave him some of the best doctoring he could have had anywheres. He was talking crazy about hearing his mama yelling like she was getting murdered. So I guess me calling him crazy for hearing his mama in the barn is a bit of the kettle calling the pot black on account of my running ins with the dark child that was spit straight out of Beelzebub's mouth. It was about this time I reckoned he weren't the only one who needed some bandaging up. Thanks to my car wreck the other night, we all had a few wounds. We spent a little time fixing up everyone, and then the night was falling quick. Old Professor F was a-vexing upon the text going on about the dark child coming, and he had to figure out another sing-song chant to make the dark child go away. You got to hand it to the colonel. He was smart as a whip and curious to the nth, and he plied himself with fervor to the task of cracking the puzzlings of Professor Farnsworth. It was about this time we began hearing mutterings and fell voices on the air surrounding us from everywheres. Rain was a-falling steady now. We was braced up as best we could be. I had my Thompson out and greased up and ready to blow 20 kisses of lead death at whatever showed its ugly head. Miss Penelope had a pistol after we told her where to point and what to pull. The professor and the colonel continued to work, and then we heard an awful crunching in the woods, and them voices. They weren't like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was like the thud of a mortar falling. You could feel each step in your chest like it was trying to steal your breath. Them awful sounds kept a coming a closer and a closer until whatever it was upon us in the cottage. I had never been through an earthquake, but whatever it was began to smash in the house. We couldn't see much through the holes in the cottage, but whatever the dark child had set upon us was as big as a 5-story barn, had cloven hooves and a forest of tentacles set up on its top where the body and head should have been, an abomination to our world and nature. I was a mite rusty on the trigger, but I found my grip by jumping up on the table, putting them that was with me behind me, and gave that beastie all 20 rounds of my magazine. My bullets bit through the wall and their mark. There was hollering something terrible, and black blood slime began to splatter from it and into the cottage. I reloaded my Chicago typewriter, and when it came back to thrash aside the walls again, I tore away at it once more with vigor. Oh, how it howled like a were-beast being tore at with silvery blades. More of that black ooze that came off it and into the cottage, but this time it splashed on us, warm and thick like oil. What was lost its usefulness and the smell. I have no words. About that time, the colonel had cracked the riddle of the chant. He stood up reading the page, and the words began a sparking like 10 flints trying to start a fire all at once. The colonel looked pale as milk, and all at once the ruckus from outside the cottage stopped, and the colonel slumped over. He'd done it. God bless that boy. He'd figured out that the Professor Farnsworth hadn't been able to in all them months at the last moment. I'll tell you what, when the chips are down, my money was always on the colonel. He earned it. So there we was, all covered in blobby black blood, smelling worse than an outhouse and triumphant in the end. We gathered all the papers and our gear and got away from Folly Farms as quick as we could. It weren't long before we were back in London and figuring our next steps. Oh, and just as I promised, I had a little unfinished business for that neighbor of Professor Farnsworth on Portland Road. Now, the colonel, he strongly argued against me visiting the neighbor, saying not to return to the scene of the crime and some such. I let him believe I weren't interested in it neither, which seemed to calm his vexing. But next day, I rose like I was working at farm at 4 a.m., waited on Portland Road for the neighbor to make his appearance. That boy must love his paper because he strode out that door early to collect it. I walked up to him and gave him the good news in the form of a wicked right cross on that smug, tattling chin of his that put him to sleep right there in front of his house. Wish I'd brought some chaw so could have spit a nice backy spit on his forehead. But like I said, hindsight is 20/20. I'll remember for the next time someone's got it a-coming.
Perfect. Very well done, man. That's awesome.
Thanks.
It's almost like a narration from like a good book or something, man. You know? So Beauregard's face is kind of all white looking, when he's done reading this, and he seems a little concerned about this whole thing about Percy finding out the Dark Child only shows herself to those who she's marked for death, and he gets a little upset, and well, a lot upset actually, and he's just not doing too good. He's kind of an emotional wreck.
Beauregard.
Yeah.
I totally understand. But now listen here, boy. I've been living a year since that happened to me. And now we got a way to put that thing to rest. We've learned a lot since then. And with our group and with you helping us, I know it's a tough pill to swallow right now, but we're gonna be all right. Okay? So I just try to comfort him best I can,
Yeah, by this time he's had quite a bit of brandy and he's a little sloshed.
All right, well, I put the brandy away because at some point the medicinal value of it passes away, and Beauregard's gonna be throwing punches at me or something.
No, he's fine. He gets kind of groggy, and you kind of put him to sleep there on the sofa in the study. And before too long, he's kind of snoozing along there. I'll tell you what, Kyle. What we can do here is just one more thing. Let me find it. So, when you guys were studying the nameless cults, I gave you guys the option of learning prehuman or prehistoric language.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do this with the others too at the beginning of the next session, but we might as well do it with you now since we've got you here. This is what's available for you to gain a little bit of knowledge in after having studied nameless cults. Within the book, there's enough of these types of writings to gain some understanding of it. After months and months of studying this, you've been able to decipher some of it. The choices that you're going to have are Sumerian cuneiform, Egyptian hieroglyphics, a language called Nacal, N-A-A-C-A-L, and the book claims it to be the lost language of Mu, M-U, which is in some ways is similar to Mayan.
Oh.
And lastly, but not leastly, what the book calls the language of Censar, which it calls the language of the Atlanteans.
Okay, so there's 4 languages we can learn.
Well, you get to pick one.
We get to pick one. So there's cuneiform, hieroglyphics, Mu, and Atlantean.
Yes. And let me look at it here. I should have written it down what you get, but you get a decent number of points in that as an other language. And essentially, all of those languages, they're not necessarily spoken languages. It will give you the ability to read them. Although with some work, you could actually speak it. But they're kind of, lost languages.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards Mu or Atlantean. Do I recall any of the tablets that we had out at Folly Farm? Any, when I'm looking at skimming it, do they look similar to Mu or?
Yeah, not really. The closest you guys could figure, and according to Professor Farnsworth, he believed that the language is similar to some sort of Polynesian language, or not Polynesian, but Phoenician. Similar to Phoenician, but not quite. So it's sort of a mystery language on the tablets. But you do have some proficiency in that as well. Not really translated mechanically into game terms, but you are able to, you, Usephus, personally, are able to not really read the language right from the tablets, but you are able to have read the translations that Farnsworth and Percy did.
Gotcha.
Most of it's been translated. So you had the English translations of that Polynesian, or not Polynesian, Phoenician-like script from the tablets. Give me a percentile roll. Did you get 79? Okay, roll a d10. Good. Alright, whichever one of those you want to pick, you're going to have a 17%.
Okay, well then I think I'm going to take Atlantean.
Alright, it's called Senzar. Senzar.
Okay, hold on, let's see here. Oops. What are you doing, spreadsheet? Or see, okay, so this is language, and
You
it's
can just add a skill if you want.
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So how do you spell it again? C-E-N-Z.
Senzar.
Okay. Ooh, I actually speak Senzar better than I know Senzar better than I know German.
Yeah. Actually, make that 22 percentiles in Senzar.
Awesome.
Because, well, since you missed last session, I'm going to give you, like, maybe a few more days of study along those lines. And you failed your intelligence roll. Could have been a little bit more, but...
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
Usephus.
Alright, cool. So I guess we'll just leave off there. And
awesome, man.
And you know, so now it's going to be, and let me mark it here, it's going to be June 15th. I believe so you would know this after having studied this stuff about the Dark Child. Let me look at the calendar here. It's going to be the 15th of June. The summer solstice, I believe in 1924, I looked it up. I believe it's on the 21st, which is next Saturday in game terms. And you realize that, you know, these murders of Farnsworth's associates, you know, throughout the years and everything, always occurred in the week leading up to the summer solstice. Anywhere between, so looking at this calendar, any time between yesterday, which is the 14th, up until about the 20th, which is Friday, you should consider yourself in danger. Because Aldebaran, you know, is having the heliacal rising, and it will be in that state up until the summer solstice, which occurs Friday night, late Friday night. So
the whole time that was going on, I was thinking, okay, if I was actually in the trees, like maybe I could use that spell, you know, control the trees to restrain her, and then we could do the chant.
Yeah.
To get her.
Yeah, you weren't actually in the trees for one thing.
Oh, I know. It was a dream world, but.
And there are some. I mean, when Percy was doing the chant and song at Folly Farm, I mean, he was the one who was doing it. It did take some time. There is a certain amount of time that it takes to do the chant and complete the chant. And there's some other sort of things that have to be checked too. There's a dice roll involved, essentially. But you guys know that, I mean, it worked back at Folly Farm, right?
Yes.
So if you
I know it worked. Nobody else is around.
It did. But there is, of course, a chance of it not working.
Right.
As well. So it's just kind of a chancy thing. So
Well,
for about
Usephus thinks to himself, is like, well, if we got to feed somebody to the Dark Child, it might be Beauregard.
right, yeah, I guess he's been marked, hasn't he?
He sure has.
I guess he just got in her way somehow. So yeah, for the next week or so, Eusephus will be quite on edge as far as that goes. And keep in mind how things have proceeded with the victims of the Dark Child. I believe one of the guys tried to rescue a child from a burning house. One guy tried to rescue a
drowning child. And then there was the train.
And then in Eusephus's case, he wasn't trying to save anyone. He was just kind of stark raving mad running down the street and found himself in traffic. So, usually it has to do, putting two and two together, there's some kind of magical thing, a magical component to the way she does it, where she either breaks your mind in some way and makes you do things that you normally wouldn't do, and she also has a way of compelling you to do things that you normally wouldn't do.
With that thought process in mind, Eusephus will apply himself on the nameless cults on like a resistance spell, like, or some sort of resistance item that he could keep with him. Maybe even see if the amulet that makes me feel so comfortable, maybe that has something to do with it. So he's come in the book for something that can help him, like a talisman he could have with him, or not just an outright spell he could cast when he's maybe over this week, just to boost up his ability to fend off her mental attacks.
Okay, interesting. Well, let me see here. You've got the book. You're wide awake. Give me a percentile roll. Let's reference the book and see if we can find anything that has to do with Dark Child in there, and anything that might be of use. Let me look at the book here.
43. That's a decent roll.
Yeah, I think it's normally a Bridewell edition is 12%. But see, I can use multipliers, so depending on relevancy, if it's not really too relevant, I give it a 12. If it's kind of relevant, I'll double that. What'd you roll, 22?
No, I rolled a 43.
Oh, a 43. You don't find anything having to do with the Dark Child. You spend a couple of hours. However, you do find something you did not notice before. Okay, a couple of things. You reread this section that talks about keys. And it starts going to these sort of similar sets of phrasings and codes and prayers found in common among these cults. And in relation to that, you find what could possibly be, you might have to verify it with the others, but what could possibly be another incantation or spell that's cross-referenced in some of these chapters, and you're not sure if all of it is there or not, but it has something to do with calling forth a horned man, or call forth the horned man.
Okay. And what does the horned man do?
You don't know. But it looks like the book may contain enough information to complete the process of doing such. So in that extra time, in the time you spent kind of perusing this book, you found that there's actually, it looks like appears to be an additional spell that you guys didn't notice before. Called Call Forth the Horned Man. And it's kind of dispersed among chapters 15 through 20 in fragmented pieces, but it looks like you could probably put it together. Again, those sections deal with what the author calls keys for similar sets of phrasings, codes, and prayers found in common among these cults. So maybe you can do some more research and try to figure out what this horned man is that they refer to.
Oh yeah, I'll spend as much time as I can. There's nothing more important to Usephus right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to your mind is like the devil, but
yeah.
But things aren't always what they appear. It has to be something else, something a little more specific. So, all right, dude. Well, we'll wrap this up and we'll continue on Wednesday.
All right, awesome, Sean. Thanks for putting that together. It was really well done as
Thank
usual.
You. Yeah, that was good writing on your part too, man. That's some good stuff there. We'll archive that shit.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll help get everybody on the same page, because I think I'm going to try to muster everybody towards the Dark Child this next time.
Right. All right, cool. All right, man. Well, I'll upload this video a little later tonight. Put it in Discord. And I think at this point, since Usephus survived, it would be okay for everyone to watch it and realize what happened. I'm sure Usephus would share it with them. Just to, I don't know if you know this, but that dodge roll saved your life tonight, I think.
I think it did too. I was like, when the truck clipped me, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah,
I was like, I was almost gonna die.
Yeah, after putting some thought into it, I thought that it would be appropriate for the Dark Child to just come after you, all fucking guns blazing. She wants you bad, and I put a lot of thought into it, and I figured, because I gave you some sanity checks, and you took just enough sanity points at the beginning to go temporarily insane, and then she mind blasted you, so you took a pretty hefty sanity hit. Well, let's look at that for a second too before we go.
Yeah.
So you started the night with
46.
46, and you lost 10.
Yeah, I think maybe more than that, right? Oh no, yeah, it was 10. It was an even 10, yeah.
36, so 20%. 6, that's 4, 5, that's 9. You lost just enough sanity for bad shit to happen to you. I guess we might as well do that too before we go. Let me pull out my Tome of Insanity here. Let's figure this out.
The old Tome of Insanity.
Okay, dude, we're talking indefinite insanity again.
Alright.
And the best thing to do for indefinite insanity are either manias or phobias.
Okay.
And this is an interactive thing. So what do you think? Mania or phobia? Mania results in an obsession or compulsion with the subject. keeper may select randomly or choose an appropriate one. Although in this kind of stuff, I like to consult my investigators and find something appropriate. And a phobia, of course, is a lasting irrational fear of something.
Well, I think... Yeah, I think probably it would be some sort of mania.
Okay. And some of these can be relatively mundane, but make for interesting role-playing. Why don't you give me a percentile roll? And we'll see what we get. And if we don't like it, we'll just roll again. I'm just kind of looking at the number right now. What'd you get?
A 14.
Arithmomania, obsessive preoccupation with numbers. That could be interesting.
That could be interesting.
A little more interesting than a lot of these. Like a liomania, obsession with garlic. No, that wasn't it.
Does that have garlic in it? Because I love the garlic.
I like that. Obsessive preoccupation with numbers. I think you could do something with that. Figure out how that could be.
How do you spell it, Sean?
It is arithmomania. It's like Arithmomania. Arithmomania.
Arithmomania. Okay.
And an obsessive preoccupation with numbers. So maybe, Usephus finds himself after studying these books and witnessing, having dealt with this dark child ordeal. Maybe it just kind of dawns on him like maybe something astronomical like astronomy or mathematics, or maybe he finds something in Fawcett's writings having to do with arithmetic, or maybe even Farnsworth's writings. Maybe he makes this sort of delusional mathematical connection with what's going on, and he becomes obsessed with it,
Yeah. Oh no. I'm gonna look this up, and
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a good start. And then it can present itself in every part of his life.
Right.
Like how many steps did it take us to get into the building? What does that mean? And smuggling and the numbers and right. Yeah. Oh.
Right. And just one more thing here. So yeah, so you have a day or two to think about that and kind of figure out how that's going to come out in Usephus in the coming sessions here. Well, let's see how long this indefinite insanity was going to last. It's going to last. Typical duration is 1d6 months. Roll a d6.
No.
So, I mean, you wouldn't know how long it's going to last, but at least we have an idea that
it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, it's pretty serious, and we can try to have it treated too, with Jacob can maybe do some psychotherapy on you to try to cure it. But given the amount of sanity that you just lost, at 10 whole sanity points.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I'm going to need some stuff anyways. I looked up a little thing on arithmomania. So is a mental disorder that may be seen as an expression of obsessive compulsive disorder. Individuals suffering from this disorder have a strong need to count their actions or objects in their surroundings.
Oh, dude, that's so awesome.
I can't wait. So, it's like, all right, there's 7 of us in this room now.
Yeah.
And there's 7 cups and 7 plates.
It's like Usephus has to take the bullets out of his magazine so he can count them and make sure there's 20, And then he'll put them back in, and then he'll be like, is that actually 20? And he'll take them out and count them again.
It can be, he's going to be like the Count from Sesame Street.
One!
1 bullet. Ha ha ha.
All
Two.
right.
2 bullets.
Very cool. All right. All right, you arithmomaniac.
All right, Sean. Awesome job, man.
Yeah, you too, man. I look forward to Wednesday.
All right, and I'll try to work on my arithmomania.
All right, cool. See you next time.
All right, later, bud.
Good night.